you there?
Oh my God. Okay. So like you said, it's like the first time every time.
Yeah. No worries. No worries.
Oops.
Good to have you. Good to see you.
I forgot I had to do this on my phone.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I don't know. That's the weirdest thing. We should be able to use our laptops, you know? But
it would be really nice, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I have to find my phone. Okay.
Okay. So how have you been, first of all?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, yeah, I'm good. It's just been kind of a busy week, but all good busyness when it's academia, you know how it is.
Indeed, that's great.
Yeah. And so I've just finished. Actually, I finished reading Sartre's plays. Like, I have a book of 4 plays of his.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and that was really good. I remember reading just like the most famous, you know, like No Exit, All People or Hell or whatever. Like, I remember reading that in college, but I hadn't read the others. And then I just started reading Simone de Beauvoir's She Came to Stay, and it is so interesting because I feel like she is like she's writing about kind of the same thing, you know, because the book is, I don't know, have you did you start it? You said
Yeah, I read maybe the first, I don't remember how many chapters, but first 5 or 6 chapters before just getting distracted. Yeah.
Okay, yes, yeah. So I think you're further along than I am, but yeah. So for those who are listening, the book is just basically about. I mean, it's semi-autobiographical, I think one could say, but it's a book by Simone de Beauvoir. It was published in 1943, and it's about her relationship with, well, the main character's name is Francois, I guess, and it's about her relationship with Pierre. They have a really strong, you know, they feel like they're one, they're just like completely in love, but they're both intellectuals. And they have this, Francois has this, I guess, student or former student who she kind of meets with every now and then. And when they all, Pierre, Francois, and I can't remember what her name is. Can you call in, is it Xavier or something?
Oh, yeah, that sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, and when they all meet together, then I'm just actually at the part where they come home from the meeting, and Pierre kind of is saying that, like, yeah, I wouldn't mind having, you know, I don't know exactly what he says, but it's kind of like she knows that they're going to have an affair, Pierre and the student, and she is having regrets. I think the last line is, I know that like Xavier exists, like I know what's going to happen and I can't stop it. Yeah,
it's like is it it's Francois and Pierre, right? I mean,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It was like a year or two ago that I probably last year that I started reading it, and so my memory of the names is a little fuzzy.
Oh yeah.
Like, so their relationship, I think, I don't know if you want to get distracted by this, but you can definitely see some parallels between their relationship or certain like that idea of trying to be transparent, of trying to negate the privacy of their subjectivity by telling each other everything. And Matthew and Marcel's, at least, ideal that they will tell each other everything.
Right, and that just like ends up not working out for either couple.
Indeed.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that like I'm also like I'm still in the beginning of it. I think I'm just on page like 206 from Of Being a Nothing. I'm on this section of temporality, which is so interesting. I'm absolutely loving it. I just didn't know that I would like this text as much as I am. It's crazy. It reminds me a little bit of my experience reading Heidegger's Being in Time for the first time. And like how, I don't know, just how like wonderfully overwhelming that experience was. And I think Sartre's book is a little bit, it's like slightly more like accessible. It's a bit easier than Heidegger's, like from my perspective, but it's just like I didn't know I could like another philosopher as much as I like Heidegger, and now I like Sartre. So
that's awesome.
yeah, but it's great. But it's what I was gonna say is that it's so crazy. Like I don't know what to say, but it's just very like Beauvoir makes some very obvious draws from Being in Nothingness, like some of the most famous passages from Bad Faith, like they're in like when she's in a cafe, I think with Pierre and Xavier, she looks over and she sees this woman sitting there with a man, and the man puts his hand on her hand.
That's funny.
Yeah, and she has this comment like it's just right out of Being in Nothingness.
I forgot about that. That's funny.
Yeah. I'm just like, this is too on the nose. I don't know what to say.
That's real. But that's awesome, actually. I mean, that's so interesting. I mean, yeah, that's real.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, but I kind of like skipped ahead and like kind of skimmed or leafed through the pages, and I saw like something about like I saw the word waiter, and I'm like, oh no, is that part in it too? Like, it's like Being in Nothingness come to life, and
that's awesome.
It's just so interesting as well. Like I'm really, I don't know, I guess slightly surprised at Beauvoir's vulnerability, because I mean, she's so, in my opinion, she's so obviously talking about her relationship with Pierre. And that was also, in addition to the transparency, that was also one of the elements of their relationship, was that they wouldn't get jealous of their open relationship. And I know that when I was reading the Bianca Benfield, or whatever her last name is, the student of Beauvoir, when they were like in their own threesome, when she was writing her kind of like vanity revenge project, which is how I think of it now, she said that Beauvoir was more jealous than, or more troubled by Sartre's relationship than she would let on. And She Came to Stay is, I don't know, because I'm only on like I said, like that part. I think I've just read 3 chapters. It seems like she's showing her jealousy, and I don't know. It's just so amazing how revealing they are of themselves.
If you do, I strongly agree. Do you want no spoilers? Because I do know how it ends.
No, I love spoilers. I know I'm still going to enjoy the book. Tell me what happened.
So my understanding, and I haven't read it, and I could be misremembering, so we'll have to double check, is that it does end with Francois killing Xavier.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's extreme.
After almost killing herself and ending up in a mental institution. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's intense. Like, I almost want to just ask why. And then on the back cover of, the back of this book, She Came to Stay, and I don't know how true this is, but it says that this book was written as an act of revenge on Olga. And I'm just like, and it's dedicated to Olga. And I'm like, I almost don't understand these people.
That's awesome, though. I think the thing that's even more just like, it's amazing. I mean, I feel like Sartre is way more cagey both Roquentin and Mathieu are philosophy professors, but their lives don't imitate Sartre's the way that Francois imitates Beauvoir. At least that's my impression. It's more like they're echoes or shadows.
Right.
Yeah. Is that your sense?
So you're saying, I'm just gonna see if I understand what you're saying. Like, you're saying that Mathieu is more like Sartre than Francois is Beauvoir.
No, that's the other way around.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Oh, okay, yeah. When you said he was cagey. Yes, I think so. I would agree, especially with what I've read in like the correspondence between Sartre and Beauvoir, that Sartre does not align with Matthew. He thinks Matthew is kind of an immature and unenlightened person pursuing, or what did he say exactly? Oh no, this was the foreword, that Matthew's using his freedom irresponsibly. And yeah, I don't see as much of a distance between Francois and Beauvoir, at least just, based on my presumptions and like reading her letters.
Yeah. And like Matthew's problems, yeah, they just don't seem to imitate Sartre's life. I mean, there's a little bit. I mean, we talked a little bit how my understanding is Ivich is also based on whoever Xavier is based on. I forget the girl's
Olga.
name.
Yeah, that's what you said before. And I thought that was so interesting because I guess I'm just influenced by reading Bianca's book. I thought maybe she was like the most famous student that they had, had a relationship with. But so you would say it's Olga.
That's my sense, though. I think my also understanding, and maybe you know more about this than I do, is that Beauvoir and Sartre at least like kind of amalgamated the two girls in their writing. Unfortunately, I read a little bit about this, but I don't remember this a little while ago. But I don't remember the specifics. But yeah,
Okay, yeah, that would make sense. I mean, and it's so curious. Maybe we'll talk about this as we get to some of the chapters today. But it just seems like the perspective and the caricature of the young kind of student, like in their, like, I don't know, like teens or like early 20s.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Okay. So I don't want to think about like other ages. Let's keep it at least 17. But it seems like their caricatures are always being kind of petulant and childish and resistant. Like Matthew is always sort of being displeased with Ivich because she is being reactionary, like when we were talking about what she was saying about the artist, she doesn't have like a highly sophisticated kind of way about her. And then she came to stay. Beauvoir is also looking at Xavier as being kind of like, she gets upset a lot, like this, like Ivich, she gets, I don't know, like petulant is the best way I can say it. And I just wonder why. Like, do you think that that's really, would that just be a logical perspective of someone who's older, who's really trying to seduce a younger person who doesn't like have the consciousness or the maturity to really understand what's going on, or to have the desire to reciprocate that? Like, is that just a natural kind of perspective, or like why would they paint 17, 18, 19-year-olds like this?
So do you think that it's not just because Olga / Bianca were actually petulant and they were drawing from real life? You think there's something more than that?
Yeah. Okay, so that's a really good thought. I think that's really valid, especially from reading Bianca's letters. Like, she's still, at whatever age she has written this book, I think she was like an older lady, she still seems kind of emotionally immature. So maybe then my question would be, why are Sartre and Beauvoir attracted to these people who have these personalities then?
Right. And like I have the same question, and I find Xavier and Ivich like annoying. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, maybe annoying is a bit strong, but like I have a hard time understanding why Matthew and Francois want to spend time with them, because they seem just to psychologize, they just seem really immature,
right,
willful, self-absorbed, selfish, what's the word? Like spontaneous in the bad, like they'll just, you know, like no commitment to anything. Yeah. What, and I mean, I definitely, I think we talked about Avitch a lot last time also, but like Avitch is also a bit of a puzzle because we never get inside her head. And I think the same thing is true. And She Came to Stay, though I'm not positive.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I really get the annoying aspect. I find myself agreeing with you a lot as I'm reading She Came to Stay. Xavier's just horrible. Like she's pure like ickiness. I don't even know what to say. Like she just doesn't add anything or provide anything. But I know that Sartre in his letters and in Pierre in She Came to Stay, they both mention how important the conquest is to them. Like Sartre will say, even in his letters, that he loves the beginning of a relationship, he loves the conquest, and then he doesn't much care afterwards. So I don't know, he's saying this to Beauvoir, so I don't know how like authentic that is, but maybe it's the conquest, maybe it is, I don't know, that because what they like about these younger people is that, or what they like in general, what they're wanting in general, is for life to feel real. Like I've caught that comment a couple of times in just, I don't know, everything that I'm reading. It's like this person makes the room feel real. This person, like now that this person is left, it's no longer real. And so maybe it's just kind of like a vibrancy of life, you know, because they do seem like I don't know, almost like wild animals who need to be, like Sartre and Beauvoir want to tame them, or like, you know, part of the conquest, possess them or make them into what they want. And so maybe there's this sense of life, but I don't know why they can't, you know, find that for themselves in other ways.
You know, there's a real, oh man, I remember there's a passage in, oh man, I wish I could run and grab it, but in Beauvoir wrote like a puff piece for I don't know, Time Magazine or something about Sartre and existentialism, and it actually explicitly discusses why because Beauvoir's talking about Sartre, enjoys the company of younger people more, and I think it had something to do with the fact that they are less caught in the social norms than older people, and so I think that had something to do with it. I have to go get it to remember the specifics.
Oh wow! I mean, well, that would at least be an explanation that I could kind of buy. That seems in alignment with their philosophy.
Yeah, because they definitely are very concerned about kind of the just acting habitually and just doing things because it's other people do them. You know, Heidegger would call it getting lost in the they, or the one, and and that's a key component of bad faith for Sartre, is because you're just doing things, you're not coming face to face with the situation, recognizing your freedom, etc. I'm not sure I really think that's true that younger people are like that, but it does seem like, like you said, it seems consistent at least. I don't know if I really see that in Avitch though, or Xavier. Do you see that in
that
them?
That she's more free?
Yeah, or less caught in social norms at least.
Well, maybe. Beauvoir is in one of the scenes that when I'm reading in that book, Beauvoir, like she comes home from the cafe with Pierre, and at this point in whatever scene this is, Xavier is living like on the floor below in the hotel where Pierre and Francois are living. And when they come back from this sort of like soiree in the evening that they were all at together, Beauvoir is lying in bed. Sorry, Francois is lying in bed.
It's so much easier in that book.
Really
wow,
is.
yeah.
She's lying in bed with Pierre, and she's kind of like staring at the ceiling, and she's thinking about Xavier in the floor below, and thinking kind of jealously or enviously or contemptuously that Xavier's so free. She's like, oh, she doesn't have someone next to her that's making her lie down and go to sleep. She can go to sleep whenever she wants. I bet she is lighting up a cigarette and looking out her window and just enjoying her freedom. And since there is so much talk about age and getting older, and even Boris in, the book that we're reading, Boris says that, Matthew is a solid man, but he doesn't have any more developing to do, and I think that that's one of Matthew's kind of fears, that his time is running out. So maybe it's like there's this nostalgia or this idolization of youth, that it holds something, like maybe like you were saying, like freedom.
Yeah, I think that's very possible.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes me feel maybe a little bit better about what they're doing.
It does, but like I still think it's weird that all the kids are very unlikable. Like, I mean, now maybe that's just us projecting our own dislike onto them. But if Ivich and Boris are not like people you want to imitate, like not just are they not nice people, they're not like. Do you know what I mean? I mean, Boris is a kleptomaniac. Ivich, I mean, if you just want to psychology, Boris loves the he's committed to the excitement of theft. Right. And I mean, I don't know. We've talked so much about Ivich, maybe we should move on. But
yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying.
And he's an acolyte. Like, he thinks he's free, but he's his freedom. He's he's kind of is it? Yeah, it's Daniel, I think, that really presses Boris on, like, calls him an acolyte or something like that, of Matthews. Right. Who can do no wrong, at least for the first 90% of the book.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, so they don't necessarily offer anything in terms of what you would usually think of someone is offering in a relationship. But for me, it is, I don't know, it's almost that the older person an older person wants to pursue a younger person, let's say 10 years younger or whatever it is, for different reasons than would normally be the motivation to be in a relationship. Like,
yeah.
So, and it seems like it's very honest in one sense, because it's completely from the perspective of the older person. Like, the younger person doesn't necessarily want to be in the relationship completely, except maybe Boris. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I think I actually admire how they are portraying the relationship between in the age different relationship, because it doesn't seem it seems wrought with difficulty and challenge.
I agree, actually, and I actually think that the end of the book made me feel better about it, because it ends, Matthew and Ivich, like, Matthew's like, no, I'm, it turns out you're a kid. You are too young. I do not love you. What am I going to do with you? Like, this is wild. And he's right. Like, it was a disaster all throughout. There is no point in which it was good. Yeah, which makes the whole thing feel a little less creepy, actually.
Yeah.
Honestly. And you know, Boris also. I mean, actually, I'm not sure. My recollection, though maybe I'm misremembering, is that Boris also ends up by kind of ditching Matthew. Though maybe I'm misremembering.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe that's not actually said. I don't.
Yeah, I don't remember. But how interesting. All right, well, maybe we should get to the chapters.
Yeah.
So, just good to catch up and go through some of that.
Yeah.
I think we're on chapter 7.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I don't know how many chapters there are, but we're kind of halfway, maybe, almost.
I don't know. Do you know what page that is? Oh, here, I got it. Okay, we're like a third of the way. No, we're like a quarter.
Okay, yeah. So this is the chapter where a couple of things happen. Daniel has his attempted murder of cats, and Matthew asks for abortion money at some point. So, do you want to start this off? Because I know you were really interested in talking about Daniel.
I mean, I guess I'll just pose some questions. Okay. I mean, Daniel is a absolutely like repugnant person. Like, I mean, that's my first impression of him. I mean, okay, so Matthew is gay. By Matthew, I mean Daniel. Yes. Sorry, Daniel is gay, and that takes a little while to be revealed. But Matthew is, oh my God, Daniel is gay, and clearly at a time when being gay, being homosexual was not socially acceptable, was, you know, socially by and large disliked. And also I think when being gay is just sound a little more, you know, was kind of also associated with being a pedophile in the social conscience. And I mean, that's the famous example from Being a Nothingness. I don't know if that's clear that that Daniel is. I mean, he does like younger guys, obviously. So I guess the question is, how much is that driving his really bad behavior? Because my sense is that he hates himself. Yeah. He hates his sexuality. He feels ashamed of it. And I mean, it seems like a very natural interpretation to say that's motivating his behavior. I mean, so we see him in this chapter, like, almost kill his cats, his utterly harmless, adorable cats, and he still kicks them, but he's going to drown them, and luckily at the last moment he decides not to. And then we also see him, and then his beginning of his manipulation and little quest to destroy Matthew's life also gets underway here, or at least Matthew's relationship with Marcel gets underway here. And again, it's not. And again, I guess the question is that also motivated by kind of self-hate? There's an interesting line starts as somewhere where like the only way to, starts as in this where something like the only way to hurt yourself is to hurt other people. Okay. And I guess I keep wondering if that's the right way to interpret Daniel's awful behavior. I mean, he's the worst person in this book, by far. And I mean, Matthew does some really kind of sketchy things, but like he doesn't try to kill his cats. Right. You know? Yeah. No, I mean, I think I would agree with you that he's doing all of these, everything pretty much that he does is because of his self-contempt. I have this quote from Being in Nothingness just because, I don't know, it was talking about homosexuality, so I thought it might relate to Daniel. It's on 108 of Being Nothingness. It is common for a homosexual to feel intolerably guilty and for that feeling to condition his entire existence. We can predict without difficulty that this man is in bad faith. So I thought that, and so, you know, I wanted to ask you, like, is there a relationship between guilt and bad faith? Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, no, that's a great question. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that he's saying that, because it's basically, he's saying in this sentence, as I'm reading it, because the homosexual feels guilty, he is in bad faith. And then on the next page, on 109, it says, he asserts that he is not a pederast, which I guess, okay, that's what you were mentioning. In the sense in which this table is not an inkwell, he is bad faith. So I wonder if Sartre is trying to, in his depiction of Daniel, make the statement that Daniel's making much of nothing, like he's making himself suffer because he's going back and forth with, I am gay, I'm not gay. I think when he goes to the fair, which I don't really understand what that place that he goes to is, where I guess people are like, guys are propositioning other guys, but in that he kind of looks judgmentally at the other older guy that's there and says, well, I'm not like him, I'm not a sod, I think he says, and he kind of goes back and forth with, I am this, I am not this, but really isn't the whole point of being a nothingness and like identity that you are, I don't know, and I mean I have to continue reading this, but Sartre always says in Being Nothingness that we are not, a table, like a table is a table, and we are not a table, like, or not an inkwell, like a table is not an inkwell, like there's a different kind of being that he's trying to suggest. And I just wonder, every time a character kind of fails at freedom in L'Âge de Raison, is that they are trying to be a being in itself instead of what's the other one, the being for itself.
For itself. Yeah.
So I don't know. So that's my thought. I don't think necessarily, like, because Sartre doesn't strike me as a writer with this particular book that he's interested in like making a political statement. Like, there's not really a political statement on like abortion. I wouldn't think there would be a political statement like on homosexuality. I think it's all about individuals like struggle with accepting their own way of being, which is a very like unstable being of only possibility and never like being what you are or what you are not, or I don't know how to say it exactly, but yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna close this door. Sorry, there was a lot there. So I agree, Sartre doesn't seem to be making a political statement about homosexuality or about abortion. I do think it's interesting, though, that he doesn't portray either as being wrong, though.
Right.
Though he seems to waffle on whether... Well, I'm not sure if he waffles. It's not clear to me. But sometimes he says things that make me think he does think abortion is killing a baby. Bracketing that. Yeah, I mean... Daniel seems to... So, as I was reading it, Daniel seems to... He seems to want to be punished, want to be scorned.
Yes.
Probably because he scorns himself, I would think. He wants others to scorn him. So, at least that's one way of reading it. So, like, I'm thinking of the last chapter with Matthew. Like, Matthew doesn't care that Daniel is homosexual.
Right.
Like, not at all. Right? Like, Matthew's, like, actually a relatively normal person. And just doesn't care. And I think that annoys Daniel. Daniel wants to suffer for his homosexuality. Which I do think is part of the way he flees from it. so he also, of course, proposes marriage to Marcel, which is another way of fleeing his homosexuality, and also a way of punishing himself by putting himself in a heterosexual relationship. Sorry, there's a lot of noise outside all of a sudden. And yeah, and his disdain for other, and he also disdains other gay people, other gay men.
Right.
There's this strange wrestling match that he gets involved in where he wants to kill the guy. Doesn't he even take out a knife in at the end of it? I don't remember. Towards the end of the book.
I think so.
And there's also a suicide attempt. His failed suicide attempt, obviously. Yeah, and so I think all of those are varying ways in which he's trying to deny that he's a homosexual. Well, that can't quite be true. But so he's disdainful of other homosexuals. He proposes marriage. So he wants to suffer for being homosexual, and he wants to deny that he's a homosexual. And I think those are both ways of trying to make himself not a homosexual, which are ways of being in bad faith.
Right. So
it feels a little shaky to me, but that's kind of the direction I'm going. Does that make some sense?
That makes a lot of sense. So then, I think the question that's in my mind now, then if, because we kind of talked about how Daniel and Matthew seem kind of like the main characters. So if Daniel's doing all this denying and feeling guilty and having self-contempt for what he thinks in bad faith that he is, even though he is a homosexual, I guess in Sartre's kind of complicated, paradoxical, distinction between ways of being, like he's not a homosexual like a table is a table. And so what is Matthew denying then? Is Matthew's issue the same thing? Because Matthew also, on a much, I guess, lighter level, has self-contempt and struggles with his own decisions and what he should do. And he also flees from, as you mentioned last time, any kind of affirmative kind of behaviors or actions. He's always just denying instead of saying yes to anything. So what specifically is it? If Daniel is denying his homosexuality, what is Matthew denying? Or is there not like a parallel there?
Yeah. I think in some sense I find saying what Matthew's denying really easy, and what Daniel's denying is a little harder. I mean, I think Matthew's denying his freedom. But I mean, of course, everyone's denying their freedom, which makes it sound too easy. But, Matthew's, I see Matthew as being like, I'm not sure the parallels are exact. I think that Matthew lives a bourgeois existence, but likes to imagine he's a revolutionary, or is tempted by revolutionary ideas, I guess. Or better way, he is obsessed with his freedom and, making himself free. But as multiple characters point out through the book, his life is one of living in, of habits. It's a very normal, boring life. You pointed out, Boris said that Matthew is, what did you say? Not going to change, not going to...
Yeah, he can't, I guess he can't become. Maybe that was it. He can't develop.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, right. But he always, right. Okay. Yes. So, but there's the interesting, he has that argument with Ivich right after they go to the museum about Gauguin, and Matthew holds out so Gauguin famously gave up his life and marriage and kids, I think, to move to the West Indies so he could paint. So he was committed. So he made this spontaneous, free choice of committing himself to painting, and gave up his comfortable life in order to do so. Matthew, I think, holds out the option that he would do the same thing, that he could do the same thing, that maybe even that he will do the same thing, that he will stop just being a philosophy professor and living his nice, boring life and give it all up and commit himself to writing his book, or going to Spain and fighting for the Republicans against the fascists. And I think Ivic recognizes that for Matthew, that's like a degraded sense of possibility. I think I forget what Sartre calls it sometimes. he calls it a wish. So wishes are like ways we have of holding out the possibility that we will change when we're not actually committed to acting in towards any sort of possibility. I forget exactly how it works, but you understand the point, though. It's like the person who's been a middle manager for their entire life and always kind of fantasizes that they'll quit their job and go become an artist or something. Like, these aren't really possibilities. They're just kind of vague fantasies that actually show the fact that they are stuck in their habits and are denying their freedom to change. That's how I read Matthew, at least. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And it's and it's the same sort of fear or discomfort in She Came to Stay with Francois, because Xavier, Francois feels that Xavier is kind of indicting her, because Xavier says something about how she is very solid and regular and predictable and etc. And Francois just hates that. But when I'm reading when I'm reading the correspondences or the correspondence between Sartre and Beauvoir, neither of them in their personal lives seem like people who have wishes, that they are deceiving themselves that they might capture, like they're doing exactly what they want to do. So it's interesting that they're creating characters who are in this kind of crisis, who haven't figured it out yet, I guess. And my second thing is that, I guess then a follow-up to that is, how can these characters be happy? How can they be like Sartre and Beauvoir? And my second question is on the wishes. I haven't read that part yet in Being in Nothingness. I always find myself wanting to ask Sartre, is that fair? It's the same thing with Ivic when she is crying about and complaining about not knowing how to stay in Paris. Like, she has to go back to her hometown, but she doesn't want to. And is that she's not committed to staying in Paris? Because I think that people, when we have wishes and we're not moving forward toward them, it's not always that we are not committed to them. It's just that we're in ignorance. We don't know how to get from point A to point B. So what would Sartre say about that?
I think I'm not sure that. Can you help me articulate? Do you think? I see those as two. I guess I'm not convinced. I see those as two separate issues. I'm not convinced. So I do find Ivic really puzzling and hard to map onto, at least how I understand Sartre's ontology of freedom. Because it doesn't seem like she's committed to anything. Maybe she's committed to her own failure,
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Well, she certainly seems to believe or have the biggest attachment to failure, because that's what she fears and kind of preoccupies her mind about.
Yeah. And she goes out of her way. I mean, because I do think in the second case, your question, like, I think Sartre's answer is pretty straightforward. There are no excuses. You are free. If you want to do something, if you really are committed to it, you should learn how. And anything else is just a demonstration of your bad faith. Like, there are resources out there, etc. I guess that sounds too contemporary to put it like that. But...
No, I agree with you. I think that Sartre would say what I would define what I'm describing as an excuse, for sure.
Yeah. But Ivic and Boris are so puzzling. I mean, Ivic in particular. I guess neither of us have read maybe enough of She Came to Stay to say much about Xavier. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if we really get into the mind of Xavier, if that's what we need to do to like make a statement. I guess unless you have anything else to say about this chapter, the very mundane question I had that is just my curiosity is what is the source of Matthew's money problems? Like, isn't he a professor? So like, I just don't understand why he's poor.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I mean, I'm guessing he just doesn't make that much money, and then abortions are expensive. I mean, I guess my theory, and I mean, I have this vague recollection that it's actually answered in like chapter 1.
Okay.
But yeah.
I mean, Jacque says that either you can't or won't manage your affairs properly. So that would indicate that Matthew just spends his money, I guess recklessly or something. But also that's a characteristic of Sartre and Beauvoir before they really make it, in life, before they start to like have their trips to America and tour the US and lectures in other countries. Like and not just through the war when everyone is kind of rationing, but in general, they don't have much money either. So, and they're both like, I guess, high school teachers. So I don't know, maybe that profession just never makes a lot of money. I'm not sure. It should though.
Yeah, it should. That statement by Jacque is definitely interesting though.
Yeah.
I mean, Matthew does not live an extravagant lifestyle.
Right. But maybe he's always like buying his student conquest drinks at cafes. So, and also, like, I guess the inn She Came to Stay, Pierre wants to, I guess, fund Xavier's life in Paris until she can figure it out. And that actually happened in their lives as well. Like, if you read their correspondence, Beauvoir and Sartre are always talking about how much money they are going to allocate to the various like lovers in their lives to, give them money for school or give them money for an apartment to live near them in Paris. So there's a really interesting kind of communal, I think, attitude they have about money that might be the source of their, financial instability.
That's I don't know what to say about the fact that they're giving money to their lovers. That's very funny.
I know. I mean, but even Matthew told Ivic that.
Yeah, he did.
Would. Yeah. Hold on. I'm so sorry. I think someone's at my door. I don't know if it's like a delivery person or not. Just 1 second. No. Okay, they went away. Sorry. I think it's like a delivery. Anyway, so yeah. So I don't know. I mean, yeah. I think maybe I answered my own question. I understand their money problems.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the next chapter is, we might split it up because it is really long. Like these chapters start being about more than just one perspective.
Yeah, eight is like, I think it might be the biggest chapter in the book. I'm not sure, but it's definitely really important.
Yeah. So also, I guess we can maybe split it up if we want to do it that way. But the first part is about Matthew going to Jacques and to his brother to ask for money. And let's see, where do I want to start? I mean, I think we actually talked about this chapter a little bit, how Jacques seemed kind of like on the money or on the nose with critiquing Matthew. And Jacques seems to be the type of person that is very secure and confident in his perspective. And he basically calls Matthew a hypocrite for various reasons. Like on 131, he says, "You see, when I think about you, I am more convinced that one ought not to be a man of principles. You are stiff with them, you even invent them, but you don't stick to them. You who despise the family exploit our family ties." And then he says about Marcel, "You don't want to marry, marriage being against your principles, but you consider yourself as pledged to her by ties as strict as those of marriage." So it's basically like you were already married, basically. And then he says, "You're a pacifist because you respect human life and you intend to destroy life." And then he says, "I don't want to give you the money because I don't want to help you tell yourself a lie." So I was wondering, in this exchange where I feel like it's so easy for me as the reader to be taken in by Jacques because he seems so confident and he maybe points out things that, oh, well, maybe that is true about Matthew. I just wondered if you thought that Jacques, how sound his arguments are, or if he is missing the mark in some way. He's misreading Matthew. And if he is with any of these sort of arguments that, you don't stick with your principles, etc., if there are logical fallacies in what Jacques is saying in his argument.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's really easy to read Jacques as being just right on the money, especially with his diagnosis of Matthew.
Yeah.
I do think, Jacques says on page 136, "This coming child is a logical result of a situation into which you entered of your own free will, and you want to suppress it because you won't accept all the consequences of your acts." I think that's very interesting. I wonder if Sartre intends us to read it that way. I mean, I think we would say in 2023 that having an abortion is like a perfectly reasonable response, that just because someone is pregnant doesn't mean you're obligated to have the child,
right,
that you have any commitment to it. So I think that doesn't seem quite right to me. Like, Matthew's quite committed to getting Marcel an abortion and paying for it. So I'm not sure I would quite read that as though he's not facing up to the consequences of his own actions. But that said, it is true that I think what is true about what Jacques says there is that Matthew is that it's another case of Matthew, is that Matthew wanting Marcel to have an abortion is another example of Matthew wanting it to both be I guess not be committed to his relationship to Marcel. He doesn't want to be weighed down by having a child. He doesn't want to be committed to her by having a child. Yes. So I think I think he's probably right about in the case of Matthew.
Okay, interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just wondered if there was a logical fallacy that was connected with like moralizing kind of behavior, like you're trying to. I don't know. Maybe that's not a good question.
No, go for it. Ask. I mean,
okay, so it makes me think that when someone is trying to frame an argument in the way that they're saying that, oh, you are a bad person for doing this, like trying to relay morals when morals might not be logical, or they're just cultural or something like that. Like you were kind of comparing our present society and attitudes of culture. So under the maybe assumption or like suggestion that morality is, I don't know, is it a logical fallacy?
Okay.
Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, I do. And I think it's interesting because this actually makes me think of existentialism as a humanism.
Okay.
Sartre's, lecture essay.
Yeah.
Because he points out there that one of the we make our own values, etc. The only real fundamental value for Sartre is freedom. And the only kind of judgment we can pass on others is whether or not they are in bad faith, i.e. whether or not they're facing up to their freedom. So, we can't say, oh crap, okay, I have to, sorry, I have to move.
Oh, no, you're fine.
So, I have to move now. Sorry. Can you hold on for just a moment?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Hello, Elizabeth?
Yeah, okay. You're good.
I'm back.
Okay.
So I don't think that quite addresses, so I think in that sense, that's at least one way to read what Jacque is doing. He is pointing out that, right, so it seems like what Jacque is doing is consistent with what Sartre suggests in Existentialism as a Humanism. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. That's helpful that you bring that up. Thank you. Because because my question is, like, for example, when basically Jacque is calling Matthew a hypocrite, is Jacque pointing out Matthew's bad faith? Because there's maybe a close connection between hypocrisy and bad faith. But when really Jacque is just trying to moralize consistent behavior, he's just trying to point out that Matthew is contradictory. Yep. But, from Sartre's existentialist position, who cares? As long as you are not lying to yourself and you're doing what you want. Like Jacque is trying to make a moral out of Matthew's life when Matthew isn't necessarily concerned with morals.
Yes, I think what you're getting at is maybe the fundamental question about Sartre's philosophy. How, Sartre at least did try to put a value, a fundamental value or moral at the core of it, the value of freedom.
Right. So maybe I should distinguish between the morals of a culture or society that doesn't necessarily mean he's being amoral. He just has a different virtue or a different morality. Would you say that?
Who's he, Matthew or Jacque?
Matthew and Sartre.
Well,
so it's like his value of freedom. That's the ultimate moral, or that's the only moral. Is that what he's saying?
Sartre?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And then Jacque, and so hypocrisy, which I identify with bad faith. Just to be, this is one form of it. Maybe it's just identical with it even. Is right. It is, I guess, immoral.
Okay, so
no, you can wait. Hold on. So denying because the only fundamental value is freedom, and I guess if you're not facing up to your freedom, if you're in denial about it, you are acting, for start, immorally, I think.
Right. So the question is, like for instance, he's saying you don't want to marry being against your principles, but you consider yourself pledged to her. So basically, when you call someone a hypocrite, you are affirming that they are not conscious of how their actions go against their values or beliefs or what they say, etc. Like there's some disconnect there. So then the question is, well, for Matthew, is there? Like, is he oblivious or not conscious about what he's doing and the kind of life that he's living?
I think so. Don't you? Do you not?
I think if it's on the level of, it's hard to deny that while Matthew wants to not be bourgeois, that he is actually bourgeois and he likes his comfortable apartment and he doesn't want to be as much of a bohemian as perhaps other people see him as like proclaiming. So maybe just on that level, but otherwise, I don't know. I think it just comes down to a judgment of how we see that kind of behavior, the kind of behavior that avoids making any kind of commitment to continue to have your options open and to always be free. Maybe that's what Sartre is saying that we should do, but it's just it doesn't seem very admirable.
So I think I want to disagree a little bit with. Maybe not quite positive. I think I want to disagree with positive.
Okay.
Because I think keeping your options open, I don't think is freedom for Sartre.
Okay.
Because I think Matthew wants to keep his options open.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I would agree with you. It's Matthew, and maybe that's how he's irresponsible with his freedom.
Yeah.
Because he reduces freedom to keeping your options open.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see Sartre would say our freedom is when we act, right?
Yeah.
Like that's his whole.
It's a commitment. It's a commitment. Yeah.
Yeah. So, interesting. Okay. Wow. I feel like in this conversation, I'm finally coming to understand some very important points about this book. Finally.
But I think just to say one more point about the commitment, though, Iris Murdoch makes the point, and I think it is probably true that like I think you could be if you see freedom as being commitment, you could be tempted to think that Brunet, a character we haven't talked about at all, but who's the communist. Mm-hmm. is the most free character, because he believes in communism, believes in the revolution, works to bring it about, etc. and maybe I'm moving too quickly and covering too many concepts, but I think it's a mistake to think that Brunet is also free, because you could also see Brunet as subordinating himself to an external authority. So like, it's very important that commitment has to be internal, and it has to, because you believe things, and because, you have to constantly recognize that it's like, just doing what other people say is not freedom. Just committing to other people's cause is not freedom. You have to take the cause as your own. You have to recognize that you can always leave the cause. You can always change it. I mean, commit to something else. At least that's my understanding.
Okay, yeah, because maybe Brunet believes, like, his belief is based on the passion and the communal aspect, and just he's getting hyped up by how communism is being represented and the feelings of belongingness. And so he's being convinced and motivated by these elements that Sartre would not agree belongs to oneself.
Yeah, I think Brunet is more motivated by an idea than by anything else, by like concrete. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to put it, actually.
Okay, interesting. So I guess my question on that would be, so the relationship between belief and bad faith, and I guess freedom and good faith. So you can have a level of belief. You can incorporate belief into good faith and living a life of freedom. Belief doesn't always have to be bad faith. Would you agree with that?
I'm not quite sure I understand your question, honestly. What do you mean by belief? And can you give me an example? I'm not quite sure I'm following.
Right. Okay. So when someone believes something, they are kind of committing themselves to it, and some people might feel that when you truly believe something, you're not really giving yourself an option for an out. If you were giving yourself an option for an out, you would be more agnostic toward whatever you're entertaining, and it's not actual belief, but belief. Maybe it's like maybe Sartre wants to define belief in a certain way, and like that is not that, but that's how I understand belief.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think it's a good question. Like, what constitutes authentic action for Sartre? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and is there a kind of belief that we can incorporate into a free conscience?
No, I mean, by belief, I'm interpreting you as meaning something like commitment. For Sartre, is that, or?
Yeah, I mean, commitment, it seems like a free kind of commitment or a free kind of belief would be one that we're always sort of have, like, we can always entertain that we can leave.
Yeah.
And so, but is that true belief? Is that true commitment?
Yeah.
If you expect it to be and entertain that it's always temporary.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it, does it? I'm not sure. That sounds perilously close to keeping your options open, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see the difference. I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure.
Okay, interesting.
But it is true that, I mean, I think one of the things that, at the end of the book, Matthew talks about how he's nothing but negate, he's done nothing but negate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think keeping your options open is just negating. And that's where Jacque is right about the child, the babe, the abortion, is, Matthew just doesn't want his life to change. Yeah. Oh. He doesn't want the baby. He doesn't want to commit to Marcel, but he doesn't want to give up Marcel. He doesn't, those, he fantasizes about giving up his job, but he doesn't want to doesn't give up his job. Yeah, all of his actions are towards keeping his life the same.
Right. No, I think that's really a helpful articulation. he doesn't want to, he really doesn't want to change, but he endlessly ruminates about changing.
Endlessly.
Yes. All right, so interesting. All right, well, we are actually at the end of the hour. I know, that's so crazy, but I think we've talked a lot about Jacque and everything. I don't know, what do you think, Colin? Do you want to continue talking, or?
I'm fine with stopping. I mean, there's a lot more, obviously. We've been talking for over an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Dave, I'm going to invite you to speak if you want to just chime in with anything. I don't know if Dave's there or not. Sometimes it takes a minute to like.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, okay. There you go. Hello.
Thanks for another wonderful conversation about this book. I don't really. I mean, you've given me a lot to think about, and I still haven't. I've only started the first few pages of reading this book today, so. Yeah, I don't know. It's gone in all sorts of different ways, and I need you guys to get on to chapter 8 next time, so that we can, so that I can catch up to that. So like it's going well. But no, it's just I thought it was a very interesting conversation about a lot of things. So I'm looking forward to reading Sartre for the first time, and I don't know, maybe next time I will have some insightful questions to ask. But for right now, I just want to say you guys are doing a great job.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you so much. We always appreciate you being here, and that is cool. I'm glad that you have the book and everything. I know that there's one quote from Being in Nothingness that I want to ask about next time, because in this chapter, okay, I guess it's chapter 8, where there's this quote, and I don't know the context of it, but it's on 130, and someone is saying he's just choosing his attitude. And then in Being in Nothingness, there's some quotes on page 104 and 105 about I am never any of my attitudes. So I wanted to kind of, just as a heads up, I wanted to like at some point cover that if we could.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, cool. All right, well, thanks everyone. This will be up on my YouTube at some point. And yeah, hopefully we will continue this in a couple of weeks. And yeah, we might take the whole summer to get through this book. But it's so interesting. And, at the same time, I'm understanding more about Being in Nothingness and Sartre. So thank you, Colin, for all of your wisdom and thoughts.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay, all right. See you all next time. Bye.
Bye.